y'all realize that I'm like, I might be American, but I'm not that American. These like colloquialisms, if I don't hear them, I don't know them.
They don't say that shit occasionally. I learned that in middle school.
I've never heard it in my life besides this movie.
Oh, I'll make fun of you more with more colloquialisms.
That's really funny now. I didn't know that.
Alrighty, welcome back to Cinema Pursuit. Today, I've got my co-host, Zach.
What's up, guys?
And we've got a great guest and a great movie today. This one has been sitting on our guest's Letterboxd top 4 as long as I've known him. We've been talking for years and years on Twitter. He's got a great commentary podcast himself for movies that everybody should check out. And he's an avid Philly Flyers fan. Everybody say hi to Pat. What's up, man?
Hello, friends. How are you?
Doing great, man.
Excited to finally have you on.
You had to throw the Flyers in there. You have to bring me pain every time.
Bro, wait, okay, I don't know the context.
The Philadelphia teams never win, that's why.
Hey, I got Joel Embiid on my fantasy team, and he just like sprained his ankle or something. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Not feeling good about any Philadelphia sports right now.
Philly sports, man.
But today, we're here with Back to the Future today. Just one of the greatest movies of all time. Pat, do you have any memories about Back to the Future, seeing it for the first time or anything in between?
I believe the first time I saw it was rented it from Blockbuster. However, I don't know, 2000 maybe, late 90s. And then I made my mom go and buy like the VHS immediately because I wanted to own it and watch it constantly. That's my first memory. But I still have never seen this movie in theaters, and it's my favorite movie of all time. And I've never seen it in theaters.
We have it here once in a while.
Yeah, do they do flashback movies or anything where you're at?
They do, but it's like I live in LA, but I don't live close enough to like Tarantino's theaters. New Beverly. I used to live up there, but I don't live up there anymore. Around me, it's basically just chain like AMC, Regal.
Gotcha.
Sometimes they play it, but I'm never around when it's playing. I'll just say that.
It's the golden goose you're chasing now.
It has been really cool how they've been bringing some of these old classics back to theaters and giving people opportunities to see them. And Back to the Future really is one of those movies that feels right in a theater. It really brings out that emotional core that you really only get when the sound is like super loud and it's like almost shaking the theater and the screen's 100 feet, tall and all that. And this movie's great on a couch. It's great on a plane, like to be Dr. Seuss. It's great in a train. It's great in a car. But it's great everywhere. But I would suggest to anybody out there, if you ever get the opportunity to go see this in a theater, this is a theater movie, and it is fantastic for that.
I agree. But even though I haven't seen it.
Zach, when did you see Back to the Future?
Gosh, so that's the thing. I've been thinking about it, and this is one of those classic movies that kind of like Indiana Jones and a bunch of others growing up that I can't pinpoint the first time I watched it. I know my parents had the DVD. I know they put it on often. I know that we didn't really watch the second or third one, I think more than like once. And I probably haven't seen them in quite a while, to be honest. But the first one was always on. And if it wasn't on from a DVD, it was on a TV channel. I think AMC would play this a lot. Some of the others.
Spike,
yep. Spike would have this
Paramount,
on.
Whatever.
Back then, at least for us in this area, all those channels were kind of around the same number. I think for us, it was like in the 60s.
61 and 64. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And I would just go back and forth because right below that was Cartoon Network, Nick, Disney Channel. So when I got bored of that stuff and I got a little older too, it's like I ventured out a little farther into the higher channels. And that's where I found AMC and Spike. And one of the movies they would show all the time was Back to the Future. So this is one of those movies I watched probably sitting down all the way through, 5 times, but I've probably seen 100 times from just catching parts on TV. And I hadn't watched it in quite a while until I watched it to prepare for this pod. And it all kind of came back to me how, great this movie is. So it was really cool to watch it again.
I remember vividly. So I would see it on TV. I've never had the movie physically, till recently. But like when I was younger, I saw it on TV. And I still remember being on Spike, the first movie ending, and then the second movie just starting as soon as the credits ended. And I was like, okay, now I'm watching 2 right back to back. So it's like, it was perfect. And that's why like my memories are joined together, at least for 1 and 2. And 2, the whole stuff with them going back to the first movie makes this movie even better for me, honestly. And I love that part of it. Did either one of y'all ever get to go on the ride? Like the Back to the Future ride?
It's now, isn't the Simpsons ride now? Is that what it is now?
Yeah, it is.
Is that what it was in Universal Orlando too?
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember being on it, but I don't remember the ride like at all.
I mean, it's better, which that's why I hated that they put the Simpsons in there. Simpsons is fine, but like the DeLorean, you get to sit in the DeLorean. I remember being a kid, I went with my cousins to Universal and I was like, oh, this is amazing. You get in the ride, Biff is like causing havoc. If you like it, just go to YouTube. They have the thing for the ride in there. And I watch it from like time to time because I really love that ride. And you're chasing Biff through time. And I was like, this is the vibe. I loved it. And you get to sit in the DeLorean. What gets better than that? So I've been a fan for a long time.
That's funny you said you guys haven't like owned it. I owned the VHS set, DVD set, Blu-ray set, and now I have the 4K set because I have to buy every copy.
But that's the thing. It speaks to the life of the movie because this is not just like some random movie. This movie, when it came out in theaters, 85, the highest grossing movie that year. And then after that, like might be the most least toxic fan base out there because like the fan community is there for this movie and they're passionate. I watched a documentary about it. I was surprised. I was like, these people are really invested in this. And I love seeing it.
It's probably because they haven't tried to remake it. That's why there's no.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, you know how many movies they've just went and defiled for money? It's almost good that they made a second and third of this movie because if they just made the one and dropped it, they would have remade it by now. But because it's a full trilogy, there's probably, if we ever see a remake of this, it's going to probably not be very good and be like a HBO miniseries. And that's a good thing because there's certain movies that should be untouchable.
You know why they're not going to remake it as of now? Tentatively, as long as Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale are alive, they're the ones who own the rights themselves for the movies. So if they're alive, they're not going to make any remakes.
Universal doesn't own it?
So when they die, no, they do.
Oh.
Thank God they own it. It would be a problem if Universal owned it. We would have had 6, 7, 8, 9, Back to the Future 15.
I could give you the cast, who they would cast in the remake right now. It'd be Tom Holland as Marty McFly and Robert Downey Jr. as that's what it would be.
Oh, you're right.
Every time you watch this movie now,
I'm gonna see it. Yeah, I'm gonna see it.
Robert Downey Jr. would just be like, great Scott. Like he would be like really dry with it. He would not make it good.
God, I'm just thinking of different like people from the Avengers just being thrown in this movie.
Ooh, yeah.
Chris Evans is Biff now.
Yeah.
Chris Evans in the 2000s would be a great Biff.
Mark Ruffalo
right?
could do a little Crispin Glover. Yeah, I could see it. That would suck.
That would be hilarious. I would pay to see that. And then I would rightfully trash on it.
I would not pay to see that.
I've got a question. So, because I've been watching this since I was a kid, so I never get to ask for perspective about this. Has Marty always been a cool kid to y'all? Because I thought he was the coolest person I've ever seen in a movie.
I think so.
Yeah.
And rewatching it again for the, millionth time. It's so funny because he's nothing like anybody in his family. He doesn't even fit like he's actually in that family. Like he's too cool to be in that family. He also hangs out with an old scientist.
Yeah.
Like,
right?
But that's the thing. I think it's a testament to Doc Brown. I think the reason the way he is because of Doc Brown, and it's not because of his family. Because nothing else makes sense.
Yeah, you're right, actually. Because his family, there's like his sister and brother seem kind of chill and like not very, they're not doing weird sciencey things like, Michael J. Fox is doing, Marty McFly. So why is he? Vikash, is there some backstory to why he is hanging out with the scientists? Do one of you guys know that? Because it doesn't make any sense why he's with Doc Brown.
I have my own theory on that.
What's that? Let's hear it.
Hit me with your theory, and I'll give you Bob Gale's writing.
Oh, yeah. My theory is, he probably is right, but my theory is since he went back in time, Doc was already friends with him then. And he was waiting for him in the future to then be friends. That's why because if you think about it, you're like, how did they even meet? He's like 17, 18 years old, and Doc's like 30, 40 something. Like, why are they hanging out?
It's a paradox, yeah.
I always thought since he went back in time, he had already hung out with him back then, and he was just waiting for him in the future.
So what I was saying is like Bob Gale, actually, him and another writer, they wrote like these comics, and he did lay out a backstory for how they met. And I'm going to make it real fast. There's some bully named Needles. And one day Marty's sitting in his garage ripping on his guitar, and Needles comes out of nowhere. I think he messes up his like amplifier or something like that. And Needles like threatens him, is like, yo, like I need a borrow the thing that I just broke from you. So Marty goes to the guitar shop, and they're like, oh, we just sold that piece to old man Brown. He goes to his place, tries to break in. But while he's breaking in, Doc has all this stuff set up, like all these contraptions, essentially traps for people trying to break in. And Marty, because he's smart, he gets through all of them. And Doc ends up just giving him a job because he's like, the kid got through all this stuff that I put down. So he's a smart kid, so he just hires him. And that's the backstory that he put in. I don't know if y'all like that, but I mean, it works. I like it.
So I like Pat's version better.
I
Sorry,
know, right?
Bob Gale. That Pat's version makes a lot more sense.
Right?
I wrote this movie, actually. It was me.
Is that...
I went back in time.
Oh, that's why you have a DeLorean. Okay, that makes sense. I should have known.
Speaking of, do you know what they originally were going to have instead of the DeLorean be the time travel device? It was supposed to be a fridge. Yeah, for real.
You know the fridge from Indiana Jones 4? It's that idea, essentially.
That's where they just recycled the idea.
Well, yeah. So the reason they couldn't figure out the fridge was they wanted to do the scene in the parking lot, of the Macy's parking lot, the mall parking lot, and they couldn't figure out how they were going to have the fridge get there and make sense. They were like, do we put it on the back of a pickup truck? Then that's expensive and kind of hard to move around and film around. So they were just like, I don't remember who it was that gave them the idea, but someone was like, why don't you just put it in a car? And apparently, I think Ford don't quote me on this, I think Ford might have approached them about using one of their cars for it. And they were like, no, we're not doing that. That just doesn't look right. But you know what looks right? A DeLorean. And then boom. So many decisions in this movie were made of them just figuring out something didn't work and just being like, okay, let's just try this. And then it being great, it just working out. Like Micheal J. Fox, Originally, who was it?
Well, they originally wanted they wanted Micheal J. Fox in the beginning, but he was doing Family Ties. And they said, you can't, no. So they got Stoltz. And they said that Eric Stoltz is a great actor. We watched the dailies and it's just not where, I don't know, something's missing here. So Zemeckis, he was able to convince the studio to reshoot 4 weeks of work with Micheal J. Fox. So Micheal J. Fox would shoot Family Ties in the morning throughout till like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Then he'd go to the Back to the Future set and shoot till 3:34 in the morning. And he'd go back to Family Ties the next day.
What's really funny, too, is that the story goes that after this movie premiered, his agent called Micheal J. Fox up because he was doing something with Family Ties in like Europe, so he wasn't even at the premiere. Called him up, and immediately Micheal J. Fox started apologizing to his agent and saying, I know I was tired, I didn't do my best performance, we'll do it better next time. And the agent's like, no, man, this is a hit. This is number one at the box office. You're good. So even he wasn't too sure about how this was going to turn out.
But I think the whole point of like him being tired like throughout the movie, it makes sense though.
It does. It's really good. He
looks like he's wired the entire movie. He's like, it's like that lag that he has where he's like, Doc, did you make a time machine out of a DeLorean?
A DeLorean? The line deliveries.
That's where you can tell.
The line deliveries in this movie are fantastic. I love all of them.
But the first scene they had Micheal J. Fox do was the one in the Macy's parking lots, and that's where he's delivering that line, the DeLorean. So I think I imagine immediately when he got on set and just delivered it that way, they were like, it's like, mission accomplished, Houston. We got him, boys. Like, this is the guy. I had to imagine it was pretty electric when they filmed that first scene with him.
Did you notice the mall's name changes when he goes back?
No.
So, since you don't know, when he shows up, originally it's called Twin Pines Mall because they talk about he used to grow pine trees there. So then when he goes back to 1955, he's on the pine tree farm. So then when he leaves that farm, he runs over one of the pines and the guy screams, "My pine," and he shoots his shotgun. So then when he goes back to 1985, it's now called Lone Pine Mall because he ran over one of the pine trees.
No, I never caught that. That's awesome.
The new one I found was the guy hanging, or maybe I probably obviously saw it, but I was just thinking about it, was in the clocks, there's the clock of the guy hanging on to the clock. I was like, oh, how have I not noticed this before? Like, it's literally right there.
It's a little safety. It's Safety Last by Harold Lloyd.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So, okay. Interesting. I'm learning about art now to do.
So, is there anything else you guys want to talk about regarding the movie before we move into some categories?
The whole weird mother-son thing happening in this movie. How do you feel about it?
I'm glad you asked. So, honestly...
Roll Tide.
Okay, so originally when I was coming up with a hot take for the movie, I thought about just coming in hot and being like, it's not that weird. And I figured that I wasn't sure how the humor of that would come across. So all I can say is, you know what? Lea Thompson's very attractive in this movie. I don't blame Marty. Hope I don't have any family listening to this. That's
because originally when they had this script going around town, every executive was like, "Are you serious? Like you can't make this.
It's so funny.
Like, it's a mother and son. Like, what are you guys doing?"
Wait till they hear about the porn industry in like 20 years. I could see why some people wouldn't want to touch it, but honestly, the movie's tone really lays itself to be able to do whatever it wants that's wacky and you just believing it and going along with it. And since the movie didn't take itself super seriously in that part and was just more, this is for laughs, it worked. I don't know how you could do that today, but it worked then.
They actually had to reshoot, or they had to shoot it, like they had to added in the part where she backs up from him and then is like, "Oh, this was wrong, this feels wrong." That was shot on like a soundstage. So I don't know when they shot it, but they definitely needed to have that moment in there where she has that reaction.
That's Robert Zemeckis' his favorite line in the movie. When he's like, "I don't know what it is, but I kiss you. It's like I'm kissing like my brother."
Her delivery is really good.
That's how they solved the problem. They're like, it's weird, right? Let's move on.
Yeah. This movie is like all about just like, let's move on. They're like, yes, it's time travel in a DeLorean. Let's move on. Yes, this, high school kid hangs out with this, weird scientist guy. Let's move on. It's so good at just being like, just take what we're telling you. We'll give you a decent explanation, but just don't think about it. Don't let it bog you down.
But it's like every single part of it, especially in the first 15 minutes after they explain everything just runs down. It keeps going. But it's like if you go back and watch it, you see all the signs that were there. So it's like that, for that reason, it's just a fantastic screenplay too. I really love it. And that's the thing. This is the best, or like the highest grossing movie that year, right? But it's also one of the best movies that year, technically also, like just from a technical aspect. And that's a rare thing that happens where it's like the movie that made the most money happens to have some fantastic filmmaking in it. I was likening it to like Oppenheimer and Barbie this year, where it's like even Barbie has like good songs that were made for the movie. Like Huey Lewis made songs for this movie. And they're not related, but it's like it kind of makes sense that they're in the same pool of like popular movies that are actually good filmmaking also. I don't know. This movie had me feeling another way. It's
Universal's, at the time, it was the greatest like test screening they'd ever had at that time.
Yeah.
And it all hindered on the parking lot scene. It was like in Sacramento, I think, is where they did the test screening. People had no idea what the plot was. So when they got to that parking lot scene and they put the dog in the car and the car disappears, they're like, did they just kill the dog? Like, what? And literally they said the theater was just dead silent. Like that entire sequence was just dead silent. And then when the car comes back, they're like, oh, okay. It's a time travel. It time travels. Okay. I figured it out.
The first like 15, 30 minutes of this movie went by so fast. When I looked, like usually I don't look at the clock unless I'm like rewatching a movie. And the first time I looked at the clock, it was 30 minutes in and it felt like it had been like 10 or 15 minutes. The pacing on this movie is electric.
Yeah. For a movie like this to be as rewatchable as it is, it really does have to have good editing and good pacing, because if you think about it, how many times do you sit down to rewatch a movie and then like you maybe change your mind because you just think about, oh, there's like that 20 minutes that just kind of suck. Let me just throw something else on,
I do that. I do that all the time.
Yeah, right? Where you're like, I really want to watch this, but maybe I just want to throw on a YouTube clip of it because I don't want to watch like this 30 minutes that are kind of lame. There's none of that in this movie, which is what it needs to be a classic. It's start to finish. It's like a roller coaster ride.
I do that all the time. When I want to watch a movie, I play the whole movie in my head and then I don't want to watch it anymore. It's like, all right, I just watched it.
Yep. Let's start getting into the categories.
Alrighty, on to Action is the Juice. We've got the juiciest movie yet again, Juice on Juice. Pat, give me your first Action is the Juice scene.
My first scene is when Doc sends Marty back to the future, because that is the best scene in the entire movie for me.
So you're talking third act.
Third act, because it's the first time also Doc sees something that actually works that he made. And I think that's the most important part of the movie for me. And the music's great. So that is the best scene in the movie, because every time you watch it, you're like, are they actually going to do it? Are they actually going to get there?
And that's the thing. I think the best action scenes are always the ones where it's like you have that question still. Like McHugh, Christopher McQuarrie, he talks about how in Valkyrie, like, do people know that they kill Hitler? Do they know when Hitler died? So it's like the entire third act of that movie, what they're doing, they don't know. Like, you want to keep the audience in suspense. And, you know, for Back to the Future, that scene is still that suspense. It is so thrilling. And I think this time around, I caught that I think it's either, I don't think there's any music for most of that scene. And it you just feel the tension within it. And I love that scene. It's like everything that can go wrong does go wrong. And I feel like that's something that they like teach in like screenwriting classes. And they do it in that scene, and it works perfectly. It's so thrilling.
It really is.
Zach,
you can throw it to me, man. I got the same scene, buddy. That's my scene too.
I felt like everyone was gonna have this scene.
It's just legendary stuff. Like when I was watching, I kind of had the same thought. I was like, someone else is gonna do this scene before I even got to it when I was rewatching it. And I was like, let me just find something else. And I wrote down some ideas. And then I got to this scene and I just deleted all of them because I was like, this is not only like the best scene of the movie, but is like textbook how you write the climax of a third act of a movie, how you pull everything together, how all the plot lines converge together, how it does the perfect balance of will he get it and will he not? Because most of the time when movies do that, it's a little hokey. It doesn't like, you know, but like you said, every time you watch, you're like, oh, he's about to connect it now. Oh, he's falling off. Oh, okay, maybe now he's going to connect it. Oh, I forgot, like a tree branch falls, you know? Oh, it's like there's all these little things that get in the way that you don't remember every time. So every time you watch, you're like, okay, now he's finally about to connect it. Something else happens and surprises you like it's the first time you're watching it. It's like really ingenious filmmaking and also like great acting. Just to all he's doing the whole time is like yelping and screaming and making faces. Like he's not really doing any dialogue. But what he's doing is so funny and is so just smart and just expressive that it really makes it's really Doc's scene. Marty's in there at the end, but it's Doc's scene and he's carrying it.
And that's the thing. I think they give you the emotional through line, which is, does Marty tell Doc that he dies or not? And the entire scene, we're left in suspense that he doesn't get to tell him. So it's like the emotionality of the movie is that Marty's trying to save Doc, right? Yeah, he's trying to save his own behind with his parents, but he's more worried that Doc died before I came. And I can stop him from dying. That's always in the back of your head the whole movie. And then in that scene, it comes back up. We think it doesn't happen. We get like, you know, a win at least that like Doc sees that, oh yeah, like it actually works and all that stuff. But then we go back and then we see, you know, Doc actually, he looked at it. And my favorite line of the movie is like the most anti-science line. And he's just like, screw it. And he read it. I love it. I love it so much.
I always love that because he's like, oh, I'll just go back a little earlier and warn him. I was like, why didn't he go back like the day before? Like, why did he go back like 4 minutes before? I mean, it's a movie, so like I can't like.
At that point in the movie, it doesn't like matter. It's just for the movie's sake, but it is one of those things. Like, man, you could have gone back like a day, an hour, like a week,
a few hours before. And be like, yo, just don't go down there.
It's just like,
but then he wouldn't. If he didn't go down there, he wouldn't go back to the Future. So
true. Yeah.
Plot hole.
Yeah. I think it was that portion of it. It was kind of the genesis of the second movie of, you know, Bob Zemeckis is the one who had the idea of them, instead of going back to like Vietnam or something, they went back to the scene in the first movie. So it's almost this like voyeuristic thing of like them watching a scene that they're in that already happened. And they do it in Endgame. My favorite version of it, besides Back to the Future, is Harry Potter 3 and Prisoner of Azkaban at the end with the time turner. When they go back, the thrill of that scene is one of the best scenes of all time of my childhood. We're going to talk about it on the podcast at some point, but it's like the juice within that, like, I don't know what Bob Zemeckis was thinking about, but he changed cinema with that. So my scene, so y'all talking about going back to the future, me, it's about going back to the past. The whole scene of Einstein getting sent to the future, within that point of like that 1 minute, we get all the thrill and the plot of like, oh, there's a time machine, time travel exists, and everything that you want to believe and have to believe up to that moment is secured. And then you can just run right into the action because Doc dies, all that stuff happens. But my favorite part is actually the reaction itself, where I think Einstein goes into the future and then they're just sitting there walking back and forth. It's one shot. It's a Z-axis shot. And those, every time in this movie we see Doc and Marty kind of thinking together in a scene, they're usually in that setup back and forth, just walking. Someone delivers their line, walks up, and then someone walks back and then delivers their line. It's like theater. I love it so much.
They're super expressive when they're thinking like that too. It's like, it's not just like you have to make it expressive because it's on camera, obviously. But like Christopher Lloyd's just doing this like bizarre look at his face, and Marty's always like deep in kind of thought, almost like, this is kind of too difficult for me to understand correctly. And the way they're able to just emote so effortful almost is like really cool in those scenes.
It's theatrical.
Yeah. It's almost like stage acting. You
Yeah.
have to be expressive. And he's good at it because he's on a sitcom.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yep. And that's the thing. I think now if you tried to do it, they wouldn't use this level of acting. They'd try to do a different type of acting that would not sell like the emotion or the novelty of like time travel. And this movie is the time travel movie. If you tell a person time travel movie, they say Back to the Future.
They do.
It's even referenced in Endgame. It's referenced in Endgame.
That's
It's the
true.
ultimate time travel movie.
It has to be. Yeah. Back to the Future too, man.
I'm just asking this off the cuff. I know we haven't done research on this, but is this like the first big time travel movie? I know there were probably B movies, but was there other big ones before this that were time travel oriented?
I'm sure there were. I mean, there's like they made like the Time Machine.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm just trying to think of like the history of it. Yeah.
They had time travel shows.
Yeah, I know that. I'm just kind of curious about that.
So they made time travel cool. That's what they did.
Yeah, Kat called out Doctor Who in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the original was like 60s.
Oh yeah, that's
Doctor
true.
Who. And I think Quantum Leap was like around
But
this
it's like
time.
this made it cool.
Yeah. No, it definitely did. It took it out of the science fiction into the pop culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like number one at the box office for like 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. It made it to where it's like you can use time travel, but it doesn't have to necessarily be like the narrative crutch. It's the element that sparks the movie, but it isn't the movie. And if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, totally. It's the plot device, but it's not what if it was the whole movie, it'd be more science fiction than what it is now is, a blockbuster that also has science fiction elements.
That's why it's like you can do Happy Death Day or like Edge of Tomorrow. It's translational, right? Like across like whatever genre.
Yeah. I'd say those are more Groundhog Day though than Back to the Future. I mean, I guess there's some elements there that are similar, but I don't know if Back to the Future has actually been successfully copied, at least that I can think of.
Can't beat the GOAT. Production value. What is the most impressive piece of this movie? Whether it's a shot, a moment, a scene, the moment where everything feels like it was left on the screen, nothing is left to the sidelines. What is it about this movie that screams production value? What is it, Pat, for you?
It is the same action as the juice scene. It's that ending scene because that entire sequence is the entire movie. The whole movie literally is for that sequence because essentially they originally wanted to shoot this in an actual like town in Northern California. And what they wanted to do with it, there's absolutely no way they'd be able to do in that town. So they're just like, okay, well, let's just use the backlot, I guess, because we can do whatever we want back there. And we don't have to build anything because half of it's already there. The only thing that they did build was the top of where the clock tower is. That wasn't there. So they built that clock tower. And like those like lions or cats were from like a movie. I forget what movie it was called. It's like something with the cats, like in early 90s, or early 80s. So those cats are like actual statues from another movie that they just found in a warehouse and just put these in here. Which actually that clock tower is the same courthouse in To Kill a Mockingbird, just so you know.
Oh.
But that entire sequence is the whole movie. For the editing, music, acting, basically it basically is almost like a slapstick comedy with what Doc is doing in general. But for me, that is the biggest production value. And that is the scene in the movie when you scream Super 8 production value.
I really want to see like what they had set up like in their notes for the blocking of that scene, because I know it was already a pre-built set, but it's like it really felt like they had it down almost like a math or a science where they knew exactly where they wanted everybody to be, kind of like where Doc was telling Marty he needs to be here at this exact time. It's like they set up that scene perfectly to capture just the action of it in a way that flowed right, and intercutting with everything Marty's doing too, which is not very easy. I think it's a great choice because you're right, the whole movie hinges on that scene working, and it works.
For me, the most important part of that is the editing in that. Because if you don't cut back to Marty at the right times and you just want to see what Doc's going on, it's like when you're cutting back to Marty, you want to see what Doc is doing because he's not doing well over there. So.
He's never doing well the whole time.
But for me, like the editing is the most important part of that, which goes into the production value.
Is there a reason Doc couldn't just have set that up a little earlier? Did he have to wait till the last minute?
That's his character. Like he's on the fly. He's an on the fly scientist. He'll figure out the plutonium stuff later.
I gotta add something. Dude, he slips the cop some money when he's asked for a permit. And I was dying. I was like, dude, this is... How often does he do this shit?
I totally missed that as a kid. As a kid, I'm like, oh, he's showing him his permit. And then when we watched it this time, it's like, oh, he's like pulling out his wallet to slip him like a 20 and they're just not acknowledging it.
Yeah, just don't worry about it.
He's just like, trust me, bro. We're good. We're good. Man, I love it. Zach, what do you have for production value?
Sure. So I wanted to focus on like one specific thing I noticed this time. So the design of the town, how they change it from when he's there in his modern time and when he goes back in time is really interesting because I noticed that they made sure to show in the entry shots when he goes back in time and goes back to the town how all those were old mom and pop shops. And when they show it in the modern time, they're all chains. And the movie never directly talks about how, the evolution of how small towns where all the local establishments are ran out and all the chains took over and destroyed any uniqueness about small towns. They don't really go into that. Like, that's not in the movie. That's very much in the subtext that I never caught before. And that was really cool, the way that they wanted to show that little thing and then just kind of not focus on it. I really like the design element there.
I think that Bob, like Bob Zemeckis, Bob Gale, they have a lot of takes that they give throughout the movie. They don't necessarily tell you them, but they're in the movie. So it's like when you go and rewatch it, then you like, oh, okay, interesting. They talk about this. They have a joke about this. But it's like, after all the, 30 plus years, a lot of stuff is still relevant that they're talking about. I love it. I think they were very prescient with what they did. And with Back to the Future 2, they were like half right about the stuff that they talked about in that movie.
Yeah, they were more heavy-handed in Back to the Future too with what they were saying in regards to, how towns grow and age and how, eventually corporations take over everything. But it felt like they definitely either they left it on the cutting room floor or they just wanted to be more subtle about it in the first one.
They guessed that the Cubs would finally win the World Series in Back to the Future Part 2.
Yeah, man. They were, that was awesome how they were basically right about that. It was pretty crazy.
And the Marlins would change their name back to Miami. Like, damn.
Yeah.
They know. Except for Jaws 19. They didn't know that.
No. I mean, they got to 4, 5, 4.
But Jaws 19 is true. I mean, the whole thing with Jaws 19 and then like the 3D aspect of it. Because after 2009, we went on a very bad stint of we need 3D, right? And I mean, they're pulling everything out of their butt that they can for a franchise, right? A Jaws 19 is pretty much just a spinoff off a spinoff off a spinoff, right? And that's what Hollywood is doing. So they had the broad strokes right as to what's going on, though, right?
No, they did. They definitely knew where the industry was going.
They guessed Marvel would make 45 movies, so.
Right? There's not Jaws 19, but there is, Captain America 19.
And there's Fast and Furious 11 coming out.
I mean... You got it. I mean, family, right?
I mean, if anything, not to go too far off, but the Marvel movies actually owe a little bit of what they do to Back to the Future. If you talk about just the general tone of them, that kind of silly, but,
of course,
not too serious, but it's still going to be engaging and action packed. That whole tone that they grab from there is all what Back to the Future did.
But why is it genuine in Back to the Future and why is it, theme park stuff in the Marvel movies? That's the problem, right? It's a more of a fundamental thing with the writing and everything in between that they have to review for themselves because it definitely is an issue to some extent.
Yeah.
But okay, back to it. You talked about design. My production value for this movie is the design. All the design of this movie, the production design, the car designs, some fantastic work, whether it's, Doc's shop, whether it's literally the DeLorean. It's some of the best and some of my favorite work I've ever seen because it's like the car itself feels like an extension of Doc. It doesn't feel like, somebody else made it. And that's it really speaks to me that every time I see the DeLorean, it really is, Doc showing up. Like, it feels like he made this out of ragtag parts and just put it together and kind of made it work. That crazy, like that mad genius vibe. So mine was production. It's production design for this one for sure.
I totally agree with you. A lot of thought and care was put into the production design, and this, there's a lot of stuff in this that if it was made today would be CGI and would look almost a little too pretty. And you can tell everything in this was made from scratch, made with care, and made intentionally. And the production designers did do an incredible job with how they did, the DeLorean, the town. I know this is costume, but Marty's outfit, Doc's outfit, the difference in the outfits with everybody that's wearing and the styles.
The hazmat suits that they're wearing.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, making it into like the alien stuff. Like, it's all genius stuff. It pairs with the writing well.
Mm-hmm. All right. Dialogues. So let's discuss what our favorite piece of dialogue was in this movie. Favorite quote, favorite anything, quip. Pat, what you got?
Well, I have a bunch, but my favorite line that's like actually like what I love is when Marty first meets Doc when he's back in 1955, and then Doc's like running out and he runs to his like shed or whatever his like lab is, and then Marty gives him the line. He's like about the flux capacitor. He's like you fell down, you hit your head. And that's when he came up with the idea for the flux capacitor. And that's when he finally believes, and he opens the door, and the reaction of just like, how the hell did you know that? That to me is my favorite line, because that's when their connection essentially to me really begins right there. But that's my favorite line. But this movie is great, like funny dialogue.
It's definitely a hard movie to pick one for.
My favorite like scene when it's like funny is when Marty's basically at his grandparents' house, where he's at his house, and he's at the dinner table. They ask when he's watching, I guess, Jackie Gleason, and he's like, "Oh, I've seen this one." He's like, "I've seen this before." He's like, "What do you mean you've seen it? Like, it's brand new." He's like, "I saw it on a rerun." He's like, "What's a rerun?" Like, then he's like, "Hey, do you know where a Maple is, or like the One Road is?" And his grandfather obviously is like, "Oh, it's a block past Maple." Well, a block past Maple, that's John F. Kennedy Drive. And he goes, "Who the hell is John F. Kennedy?" And then my other favorite line in that scene is when he sees like, "Oh, so you're my Uncle Joey." And he looks at him, he's like, "Better get used to these bars, kid."
There's also a line about him having like 2 TVs in that scene. It's like,
he
don't be
must be
silly. No one
rich.
has 2 TVs.
Yeah, you must be rich.
Yeah.
They definitely take that scene where it's like, it's supposed to be like a plot moment, but they pack it full of like the comedy, and then they get him to see all like the differences of like 55 and 85, 30 years ago, what was the difference? And they do it well in that scene. I love it.
But those are probably my favorite. And then when he keeps saying heavy, like this is heavy, and he's like, weight has nothing to do with it.
Okay, so let me go then, because that was going to be mine. So I wrote down the dialogue back and forth, because there's a lot of great ones. I just wanted to write down the one that cracked me up the most when I rewatched it lately. So it was Marty goes, "Whoa, wait a minute, Doc. Are you trying to tell me that my mother has got the hots for me?" Which is a really funny line in itself. And Doc's like, "Precisely." Marty's like, "Whoa, this is heavy." And Doc says, "There's that word again, heavy. Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull?" And the way where Chris Lloyd just sells that line of just bewilderment and just a little irritation is just freaking awesome. It's so funny.
And I think that at some point, oh no, it's when he gets out, and I think he's in the hazmat suit, and he's like, "Oh, it's like, was there like a nuclear outfall, or like nuclear whatever fallout? So like, y'all have to wear that now?" All of that stuff is so good. I do have a question for y'all. Biff's line, he's like, "Make like a tree and get out of here." What does that mean?
The real line is "make like a tree and leave." But he's so like dumb that he doesn't know the actual joke. So he says, "Make like a tree and get out of here." But it's "make like a tree and leave." Like a leave.
Okay. Because that line always confuses me. I'm like, what does that mean?
Well, it's
like,
addressed
saying?
in Back to the Future. It's addressed in the second one. He finally older Biff addresses the younger Biff. That it's like, it's leave, you idiot.
Oh, so I got to watch Back to the Future 2 now. Sounds like a great idea. But this is a weird one. So for me, the dialogue that always sticks with me, besides all the great stuff, like all this stuff, the comedy, like, "Doc, you're telling me you made a time machine out of a DeLorean?" That stuff. It is Tom Wilson, Biff, saying "butthead." I've never seen a crueler bully for the most part in these movies. So the Layla, as in the Goodfellas Layla, the best needle drop or use of score in this movie. Pat, what love do you have for Back to the Future for the music?
So I have 2 needle drops. The first one I have is, again, the end scene. But right when he sends Marty back, the music stops and it's dead silent. And then Doc stands up and he runs out into the street. And then when he screams, you hear the little theme of just the Back to the Future theme when he realizes that something he made actually worked. And that's my favorite needle drop. My other needle drop is the Earth Angel scene when they're singing that. And Marty's basically disappearing. And then his dad pushes the most caricature laughter actor I've ever seen over onto the ground. And then when he finally kisses, and then the chorus of just Earth Angel plays, and Marty just stands up and he's just playing too. And then that's my other favorite scene in the movie for needle drop.
It's really funny because it's almost, especially with how Crispin Glover is doing it, it's almost like corny, but you still are fully invested and fully believe in it. Or like, yes, they're getting back together, and it totally earns it. But you're right, it's so over the top. That guy who just looks like the world's shittiest ninth grader, and then Crispin Glover just doing his strongman, I'm confident now thing. It's just so funny. The one I had before that. Yeah, the one I have is actually right before that, which is the Johnny Be Good needle drop when he's up there and he's just playing it. It's almost a little cheating to say that's a needle drop because it's integrated into the scene itself. But that's like, that's the scene, man. That's the scene that like, oh shoot, he's getting out there, he's gonna start, rock and rolling, and all the kids start dancing all crazy. But then he gets to the end and starts doing like this guitar solo, and everybody's like, what the hell is that? And the whole famous line that's like, don't worry, kids, you might not get it, but your parents or your kids are gonna dig it. Whatever he says there. Your kids are gonna love it, which you see like memed at this point.
My favorite part is Chuck Berry on the phone.
Yeah,
because it's supposed to be a joke on like Elvis, like, oh yeah, like that is perfect. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh yeah, like, and that's like, I love those jokes. It's such a meta joke, and it's like it's not like they're saying that Chuck Berry, took from this kid. They're just trying to make the Elvis joke.
Vikash, what is your Layla for this movie?
I gotta give Alan Silvestri his flowers because just for me, from my perspective, I have a Spotify like playlist called Scores, and the first score I ever added to that playlist that I've listened to for like more like 7+ years is Out of Time, or like is Back to the Future theme. And every time I press on that thing, I always hear Back to the Future, and every time I'm like, Alan Silvestri, one of the best scores ever made. And every single time throughout this movie where his music either comes in or it comes down, you just feel some other feeling. And this movie has I feel like it's the same set of, instruments, but it's just whatever he's playing in this movie just makes me feel enthralled. And we get it from like, John Williams. We have, Harry Potter, Jaws, Star Wars. John Williams did all those, but this is the Alan Silvestri one. And this one I hold dearly because it is a banger of a score.
I know you want to talk about the score, Pat. Go ahead. I can see you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, it's like besides Lord of the Rings, this is my like favorite theme like of all time. And it's not John Williams, interestingly enough.
Dude, if you would have put a gun to my head and asked me who made this score like an hour ago, I would have told you John Williams. It really just sounds like him.
I think it's because movies now don't like have themes really anymore, like they did in the 90s, 80s, 2000s, 70s. But I mean, Silvestri's really, I think he's one of the most underrated. I mean, he actually did the Avengers theme, Alan Silvestri.
Yep.
But
yeah.
I think he's the most
like
underrated.
Zemeckis
has used him a lot.
That.
Yeah, Zemeckis has used him a lot. I mean, he did Forrest Gump. Like, he did Contact.
Forrest Gump's
the Forrest Gump score is like really underrated. It's really good.
Yeah. Mummy and Mummy Returns, the scores on those are extremely good too. Those are ones that I don't think he gets enough credit for. Same thing on my playlist.
Yeah. No, it's almost kind of funny how Zemeckis makes a lot of these movies that are very Spielbergian, very Spielberg-esque, and then he gets a director that's a score composer that is very John Williams-esque. It's kind of funny. It's like he is the natural protege of Spielberg, which it makes sense because Spielberg is part of the reason this even got made. It's really interesting how that works.
Pays to have friends in high places,
right?
Spielberg was helping.
Yeah. Turns out when you're Steven Spielberg, you can just get anything you want made.
Pat, have you heard this? This is kind of like a Mandela effect thing. Have people told you that Steven Spielberg made Back to the Future? Because I've heard it a lot.
Yes, people think that he directed Back to the Future and The Goonies, but he didn't do either of those. He was just basically producer.
Is it just because it's a vibe that's very Spielberg?
I think it's because it's the same vibe that they give off. Like it's the same. If you watch like The Goonies, you get like for some reason you feel like you're watching a Spielberg, even like a Back to the Future type of vibe. But I think a lot of it is because on the poster it says Steven Spielberg Presents, and people are like, "Oh, he must have made that." It's like Tim Burton presents Nightmare Before Christmas, but he didn't make Nightmare Before Christmas.
And you still see the Spielberg influence everywhere. I mean, you just did Super 8. That's a, J.J. Abrams just literally doing Spielberg.
He was like, "Hey, Steven, like I'm just gonna copy you and make a movie." Like,
yeah,
and you're gonna be upset at some point.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Spielberg actually said that. Spielberg said that Super 8 was like the most fun he ever had on any set.
Really?
Probably because they just kept praising him when he walked around. He'd be like, "Yeah."
What about Austin Powers 3?
Second favorite, he said.
Yeah, baby. You know who should have been in this movie? Come on, guys. Let's recast a role in Back to the Future. Recasting a role in this movie is kind of a big feat, I think. But Patrick, hit me with something.
I recasted all 5 of the roles.
Let's go.
And okay, you have to think it's 1984, filming it 85.
Okay.
So when I say these names, you're probably gonna be like, "What?" But hear me out. So I'll start with Biff Tannen. I'm recasting him with Val Kilmer.
Okay.
George McFly, recasting with John Cusack.
Oh, okay.
Lorraine Baines, Michelle Pfeiffer.
Okay. Yeah.
Doc Brown is George C. Scott.
Okay.
Ooh.
My number 1 overall pick. Marty McFly is played by Tom Cruise.
Oh, okay. Tom Cruise could nail this actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is right after Outsiders and All the Right Moves. He had not done Top Gun yet, so he was still in that window of he's not that huge star yet, and he has the charisma.
So it would have been a need for time travel. I would have loved it. He had the power.
But
for that.
that's my
Totally
that's
had the
my
power for it.
recasting of all of those roles.
That honestly, I never thought. So I didn't even try to recast Marty McFly because I thought, well, you just couldn't. And I never thought of the Tom Cruise comparison. That's awesome, actually. He's the only person with the right type of, especially young Tom Cruise. He has like the right energy of someone who's like young, still not fully sure of himself, but still has this command of charisma and command for the camera. Yeah. Oh gosh, I would actually watch that. That's awesome.
I'm making it tomorrow.
Okay.
Oh, like I said, he has the DeLorean. He wrote this movie. He knows how to time travel. I think you need to change some stuff because we're not in a good timeline, man. Zach, hit me with your recast then.
Yeah. So I just wanted to recast one role, which was Crispin Glover. No offense to Crispin Glover. He's the one role in this movie I'm still haven't totally been sold on. I think actually Rick Moranis would have been great. So if you don't know him, anybody listening, Spaceballs, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, ton of other movies from that kind of 80s-ish era. Hilarious actor. And I think he could do kind of the humor that Glover did, but also be a little bit more relatable and less weird than Glover was.
Don't worry, they still recast Crispin Glover anyway. So.
I know, right? They literally hung him upside down, so you can't tell it's not him.
Couldn't tell it's him.
But yeah. I mean, it works.
Well, do you know why? I read in the back, for the movie, he was like really hard to work with. That every time they gave him some directions, he just wanted to do his own thing, his own interpretation of the character.
He also wanted like a lot of money, and they were just like, "I'm not paying you that." And he was just like, "Okay, I'm leaving," and they were like, "Okay."
And this isn't my hot take, but I really think you can see it in the movie that it almost feels like sometimes with the way he's acting and reacting to stuff, it's like he's in a slapstick comedy and not a action adventure family comedy. Like you can sometimes feel like he's a little out of sync, which is still, it's not like it doesn't ruin the movie, but you can see that tone difference there.
Yeah, no, I understand. Guys, I kind of went off the rails with recasting. I did. So for anybody listening, we were supposed to shoot this a couple weeks ago, and we had a couple sicknesses, but we're here. So I had done some recasting then after I'd seen the film, and I sat down last night and I did it again. But I have 2 different sets of stuff now. So the first set is for today, like a contemporary, like if we were going to fall into the traps of remaking and rehashing stories, who would I put in this movie just, out of my head? Tom Holland obviously came up, but I know both y'all like The Way Back. What do y'all think of the kid, Liam James, for Marty McFly? I know he's really awkward in Way Back, but maybe he could pull this off.
I haven't seen him in anything since The Way Back. Is he still acting?
He's been on a couple TV shows, I think, but
He was really
Way
good
Way
in
Back's
that.
mainly his
Yeah.
maybe only like big thing, I would say. I could see it.
Yeah.
I think he'd have to be directed very well. But
Yeah.
I could see it.
So for Doc, depending on age, like right now, like you would need someone maybe like a James McAvoy, like Donald Glover age. But like the person that I went to for Doc right away was Paul Giamatti.
Oh yeah, I can see that. He's got the quirky.
Paul
the
Giamatti.
quirkiness.
He could do Doc. Think about like the energy that he had in Big Fat Liar, but him bringing it back for his current age, essentially.
When he's about to go into the pool, like that energy.
Yeah.
In Big Fat Liar.
I did have a couple like, Biff ones. I threw out like a Charles Melton, Jacob Elordi. I'm not worried about it. For Lorraine, I had Haley Steinfeld and like Haley Lou Richardson. I don't know. They seem like they got the vibe for like a Lorraine.
Haley Lou Richardson has some of that awkwardness that or Lorraine has. I could see that. I feel like you're just pitching Haley Steinfeld because we have a guest on.
If she's in that, I'll be there from day one. First showing, I'm gonna be there. If Haley Steinfeld's in it, so
I wasn't thinking that way, but it worked out. Okay, so
I would watch it. Obviously,
I would watch it too, man. So what I did was I was thinking about it last night because it was 30 years ago. So 2024, we're sitting here. Imagine if this movie was in 1994. We're transported back. Pulp Fiction, Forrest Gump are in the theaters right now. Who would be in this movie? So I'll go from the bottom. I went from like ages, like compared to like who they were in Back to the Future when they filmed it, and then what they were in 94. So for the girlfriend, for Jennifer, I went Uma Thurman. That's the first one.
Okay.
For the second one, we're going with for the mom, for Lorraine, I did Winona Ryder.
No, I could definitely see Winona Ryder. Yeah.
Okay. The next one is Biff. Y'all gotta follow me on this. Ice Cube for Biff.
You lost me.
Bro, like just imagine him being mean. He would be so mean.
So you're thinking
he's
like
mean in like every movie.
Yeah, that's true. So you're thinking like 22 Jump Street, like Ice Cube, like mean mugging. That okay. Which I guess that's what he does in every movie, you're right.
But he was young then. He was in the right age that, that the other actor was in.
I could see it.
Yeah. So the main two though, Doc Brown, Robin Williams.
Yeah, he's got the energy.
Do I even need to explain? Like
No.
that energy, like he would be the only other person that could play Doc correctly, in my opinion.
Well, then I have your Marty. I don't care who you're about to say. I have your Marty then.
Who is it?
If you're doing,
I'll hit you with mine.
Yeah.
My Marty is Leonardo DiCaprio.
No, that's the wrong one.
What do you mean it's the wrong one?
Okay,
Who
if
is
Robin Williams is your Doc, then Matt Damon needs to be your Marty.
Shout out to Goodwill Hunting. I 100% was going to pop in and say that if Zach didn't.
Look, they got the dynamic. He's about the right age then. I'm just saying, if you're going to go that way, you might as well just make it a thing.
I mean, I like them apples. That makes sense to me. Okay, we'll go with Matt Damon. I like it. It works.
Yeah, I kind of like the Leo casting. Like
Yeah.
Leo.
Leo would be 20, so it was like the perfect time for him. Like it.
Would that be before Titanic?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that would be the
Yeah.
right age for him, definitely. Could he do that kind of like, why, like, there's a sort of optimism that I wonder if he could do there.
I mean,
I don't know.
He
can really do
he
anything,
Can play
I guess.
Fun.
Yeah, he can do anything.
Yeah,
so
like,
I don't know. Yeah.
Leo's
Mhm.
got it. He's got that. As long as he doesn't have 8 whiskey sours, he's gonna be good. Okay.
You want to go to hot takes?
Alrighty, on to hot takes. If you have a hot take, say it now or forever hold your peace. Kat, I heard you have a hot take. Come and hit us with it because I know I don't have one today.
Okay, so I'll fluff it up with some nice stuff afterwards, but honestly, there are some time travel plot holes, especially seeing how he goes back in time and he's trying to avoid a paradox, and by doing so, he creates a paradox. And honestly, I think the Ninth Doctor in Harry Potter 3 does it better.
What's a paradox?
A paradox?
I'm joking.
Do you want me to get
I'm joking.
No. I was like, do I need to get a scientific definition? Because I'm not going to explain it. Please don't make me do this.
No,
I'll
but
quit
like
the pod.
I think this is, like I said, this movie made time travel cool to where it's like you don't
did.
need to know the logic of the time travel. Time travel exists. It is the forward movie, like propulsion of this movie, and that's all you need to know. Like all we needed to know is that, and then you need some plutonium, you know, and that's why we have a. Ooh, yeah, I've got a hot take now.
Okay, cool. I'm glad that I helped you cook something up.
Wait.
Okay, well, I appreciate what.
I think Hot Tub Time Machine is the best. I'm kidding. Okay. Continue.
No, Hot Tub
what
Time
I-
Machine 2 is better, man.
I saw that in theaters and I had a blast. Hot Tub Time
I
Machine.
haven't seen it. I should watch it.
Did you like it more than Back to the Future?
No, but it has a young Winter Soldier in that.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
That guy.
He's the bad guy.
Oh, yeah.
Sebastian Stan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what I really appreciate is how you can tell that this movie is just a please trust the process kind of thing. It's like we understand that the time travel is not perfect. We got most of it down, but it's not perfect. Just enjoy the ride, for the love of God. Please just enjoy it. And you know what? I'm all for it. Yeah, I came in and I said that an episode of Doctor Who where the Doctor and Rose go back in time to see I think it was her father's funeral or something, and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban do technically hit the concepts of paradox better and actually like keep the logic from having too many plot holes. But this is probably like a really well done, more fun energy kind of movie.
But the thing is, it's like this wouldn't exist without the other, right? Like Back to the Future has to go goated, so then those exist.
100%. And I'll follow that with like, this is a really well done movie, even with the plot holes, and I still love it. Like, this is no hate at all. It's just me fucking
There's a
around.
great line in Tenet that says, "Don't try to understand it, feel it." And I feel like that applies to this movie, where it's like, just don't try to think about it too hard. Just if it's working for you, then it's working. If it's not, then it's not.
I
The
respect
vibes are
when they
impeccable
just kind
here
of
compared to Tenet.
tell you that.
Yeah, but hey, you know, but that's what I mean. That's kind of what the movie was trying to do there. And see, it didn't work in Tenet as well, but it definitely worked in Back to the Future, where you don't need to explain every little thing. There's a movie, was it Primer? Was that the one where they really tried to explain it a little bit more? I might be getting my movies mixed up, but
Super complicated.
it was where they tried to explain the concept a bit more, and it was good if you like that hard type of sci-fi movie, but not that you don't need to do all that for every sci-fi movie.
It's a lot of thought.
The general public, because of movies like Back to the Future, understand the concept of time travel because it's been popularized in all types of media.
Oh yeah, I will say, y'all talked about set design for the production value. I loved it. I was sitting there and the whole time I was telling Zach, I'm like, I love all the little details. Like he said, with the businesses being different from small mom and pop shops with no chains and to a whole town full of chains. But also, did you notice like the score changed? The type of music that was playing just in the background. I loved that. Just these little details. Like this movie has details to show the difference in the times. And then when Marty changes the future, they have the changes in the future that are reflected well with the mall. And even the clock, I believe I saw something where it said, I didn't pick it up, I went on Reddit, where someone said that a piece of the clock tower was broken off. And I said, like, these are really good details to have, and I love it. I love to see it. And the fact that even with, you know, the scientific plot holes being there, they did a really great job of just the continuity and the set design. I just loved it. Great movie.
It all depends on how much time you're spending on your movie, and it feels like the love and care they put into this movie, you don't usually see it this hard, going this hard in other movies. And I love this movie that much more because of that, because they cared about it.
Oh yeah, you can tell that this was a project that everyone worked on and put a lot of heart and soul into.
I always say at the end of the day, it's a movie and it's not
Zach,
real.
what's that hot take?
Exactly.
Okay. So, have you guys seen Dumb and Dumber?
Of course.
You know, at the end of Dumb and Dumber, where he's wearing the bulletproof vest and he's asked, "What if I got shot in the head?" All I'm saying is the bulletproof vest was a stupid idea. And I'm talking about in the context of the movie, because what if they shot Doc in the head? What if they just
Maybe.
executed him? That bullet.
Maybe Marty wrote in the letter, "Don't worry, you don't get a headshot. Just put a bulletproof vest
What
on."
if because he's wearing the vest, he's maybe like a step backwards, and instead of shooting him in the chest, they're just like But one of the bullets just
Y'all
hit him in the
thinking
head.
too hard.
You just don't know how that's going to change the
Yo,
time.
why are you making me cite Tenet? Just
There's
go
not.
with
I don't
the
have a real
vibes.
hot take
No,
for
my,
this movie.
my actual hot take for this movie is the only thing that ages bad in this movie is not the incest. No, what I mean actually is like having Libyan terrorists is the only thing that was bad. They could have just kept it, just not named or whoever it could have been. Instead of having a brown terrorist, they could have done something else. Besides that, this movie is timeless.
Could have been the IRA.
No, it should have been the British people.
Those aren't terrorists. Those are colonizers.
The letter says, "Dear Dr. Brown, on the night that I go back in time at 1:30 a.m., you will be shot by terrorists. Please take whatever precautions are necessary to prevent this terrible disaster. Your friend Marty."
So he doesn't
really
tell him.
Shitty.
He doesn't tell him.
Really shitty handwriting.
And that's the thing. Doc just is scientist, man. He just wears a bulletproof vest. He doesn't know if he's getting shot in the head. I'm just saying, should have thought about the head. I don't know what you would wear to prevent a dying from a bullet to the brain, but I'm sure he could have figured something
Doc
out.
has his own guns instead. He pulls out an RPG.
That'd
Yeah,
actually
just
be pretty
coming
funny if
out
he had
shooting.
if he just had his own gun ready. That instead of the bulletproof vest, he just had his own gun and it was just a firefight.
That's me if I made the movie.
If it was a
That
modern
would be
movie, that
so
might be
me.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
But besides that was my hot take. It's like the only thing is like y'all should have just had non-brown people as terrorists. That's it. It's like at the end of Rocky, like 2 or 3, and they're like, hey,
I
the
think that's
Mujahideen.
How they thank the Iran Contra or something at the end of
Yeah.
No, Rambo 3. They thanked like the Iran Contra or something.
Yeah. I like seeing that still
is
pop up on
85.
I was watching
Twitter
Top
or
Gun
whatever.
Maverick, and they do it right. Like I just watched it this week when I was sick with the flu, and not having the villains named as like Russia or like some other country will help that movie age perfectly.
Actually, I think in Dunkirk, did they ever say like Nazi in that? I don't think they ever does.
That's a good question.
And you
I don't
never see
think
them
so.
really. They're always out of focus.
Oh, that's a really good question. You do find there's a spy at one point, but you don't see them
It's a
otherwise.
testament to
I don't know if they
Nolan's
say call them
horror
Nazis.
making. That's his like horror filmmaking. That like we see the pamphlets, right? But besides,
I
It's just the
that's
enemy.
genius.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
Well, I mean,
Because when Tom Hardy gets like captured at the end, they're out of focus. You can kind of see one person's face, but you don't really see them.
well, yeah, and part of the not to sidebar so much, but part of the fear in that movies too is the fear of the unknown. You don't know, you don't see the enemy. They're just going to drop a bomb on you or starve you to death. They're not going to shoot you in the head.
Yeah, I
Way
will
off
say,
topic.
whenever
Let's-
y'all watch Godzilla -1, remember this conversation, okay? That's all. On to the Oscars. Did this movie get any Oscars? Did it deserve any more? What should have been nominated? What shouldn't have been? What's going on with the Oscars for Back to the Future, Zach?
So Back to the Future received 4 total nominations, with one of those being a win. It was nominated for sound, for writing for screenplay, music original song, which was The Power of Love, which was also written by Huey Lewis, and it won for sound effects editing, which I guess that is sound mixing now and sound editing
Yeah.
now, or whatever the new category is, but back then it was sound effects editing. So that's all it won for. It didn't get a nomination for cinematography, for score, surprisingly, directing, and I did look at the list of movies that were nominated that year, and to be absolutely honest, I haven't seen most of those, so I can't really give a good substantial argument, and if you guys have, feel free. But I did find it odd that, when movies are ahead of their time, something that the Oscars tends to do is not reward them. They'll usually reward the next movie that builds upon it. And this was ahead of its time, a movie. So it was unlikely it was ever going to even receive. The fact it received some nominations is a good thing.
What were the Best Picture?
Best Picture nominations were Out of Africa, The Color Purple, Kiss of the Spider Woman. I don't know what that is. Prizzy's Honor, which was a John Huston movie, and then Witness, Peter Weir. Pat, have you seen Witness?
And Out of Africa
Yeah.
one, right?
Yeah, Out of Africa one.
So
I have seen
do you-
Witness, yes.
Yeah.
Filmed in
So-
Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
I really love Witness, but do you think the script for Witness is better than Back to the Future? Because Back to the Future and both of those were, I guess, original screenplay. It's written differently, but it's original screenplay. And Witness won that year.
Back to the Future script is better. That's what I'll say.
My argument is that they at USC, University of Southern California, they literally teach the Back to the Future script as the perfect, script. It's aged better. And like, yeah, they have like Terry Gilliam's Brazil in there, which is, I guess, for novelty, it definitely should be in there. But Back to the Future should have definitely won this. No question.
It didn't receive a nom for visual effects either, which is odd.
No, it didn't.
No, and not for editing either, which is also odd because you could make an argument those are, that and the script are the three strongest technical categories in the movie.
I think if you have what they have now, where you can have up to 10, Back to the Future might slide in there for Best Picture nom, but I still don't think they would reward it with directing.
They wouldn't.
Any acting. But I think what it should have won is score. It should have been nominated and won for score.
Yeah, 100%.
This year for directing, listen to this though. It's Sidney Pollack, Hector Babnenko, I don't know who that is, John Huston, GOAT, Akira Kurosawa for Ran,
which
and
was
Peter
not even
Weir
a Best
for
Picture
Witness, right? So it's like, okay, if you have Akira Kurosawa, you can't even argue. I understand, but everyone else, like, okay, come on. Back to the Future was awesome.
That's really funny. You're
Ran
right.
is so
all
good.
those others were in Best Picture, but Kurosawa they left out. That's bizarre. And what you said before, Pat, about this, even if it was on 10 nominees and it got nominated, and it still wouldn't even be Best Picture. I think very recently the Oscars has began to be a lot more populist, but I would say for its long history, it's been very not populist and very what the group of people in the Academy, their specific tastes reflect, and they never really coordinate with the public. Even though we have talked about how this year, Oppenheimer and Barbie made a lot of money and were heavily seen at the Academy, and we'll see this year if they are actually rewarded. But usually they're not in sync. The box office, and it's like that weird stat in football where whoever wins the MVP or has the most passing yards almost never wins the Super Bowl. It's kind of like this. Whoever has the best box office almost never wins the Oscar. It's just never in sync. But I think that's enough for the Oscars for this. I don't think there's a lot of juice for this one.
Alrighty, on to legacies. Through the prism of time, it has been 30 plus years after this movie. What pops it into y'all's minds, whether it's about the people in front of the screen or behind the screen? What is aged well? What is aged bad? Whatever it is. Pat, what's the legacy of this movie and these people?
I mean, I think the legacy is, it's my favorite movie of all time, and it hasn't changed. And that's the legacy for me. Because to me, I don't think anything will knock down Back to the Future as my favorite movie of all time. Because I could put that on every single day and never get tired of it. But some people, other people might, but not me.
Mine is The Dark Knight, right? And I talk about The Dark Knight the same way. And Back to the Future is a top 5 rewatchable movie of all time. The movie survives on cable because 1, 2, and 3 are all rewatchable. And it's like the plot mechanics that are set up. It makes you want to watch these movies again. And they're well made. And everything just runs extremely well. And if it didn't, we wouldn't be talking about the movie today.
I think going back to what you said earlier too, about how Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale never want to have this movie be remade while they're still alive. And I think that's part of the legacy is you can't touch this and I won't let you touch it. But they are getting up in age, and I'm sure someone has that script ready to go. Like they'll hit send.
I'm dreading it. It's gonna happen in our lifetime, sadly.
I'm not I'll go see a remake. I'm like, whatever, I'll go watch it. And like but I think if I see that, I will be like, I can't watch it. I refuse to watch that movie.
I'm one of those people where if they do a remake or a sequel that I totally disagree with, I just pretend it doesn't exist. When they made Sicario 2, I never went and saw it. I love Sicario. It's one of my favorite
saw
movies.
That in theaters.
Yeah, I was like, screw it. I'm not seeing
I did
Sicario 2.
too. I saw it in theaters.
I'm not acknowledging the existence of this movie.
I think took my dad to Sicario too.
I mean, spoiler, like at the end, you don't care. So
I don't care.
A spoiler at the end, Benicio del Toro gets like shot like 8 times. And I literally sat in the theater with my cousin and I was like, I turned to him and I said, if he gets up, I'm going to be annoyed because they make him like a superhero. And I was like, I'm over this.
That's what I heard. And that turned me off on it.
Yeah, I was just like, I think Taylor Sheridan did write that though. But
yeah, then he went and just did TV
what
forever.
He said about that, he was like, he literally said, you do not want me to write a sequel. That's what he said.
Yeah, I remember that quote.
It's like Spielberg with E.T. Like he purposely made a really terrible idea for a sequel so they wouldn't make an actual sequel.
So Spielberg's kind of funny like that. For Back to the Future, they wanted to call it, like Spaceman from Mars or whatever. And Spielberg's response to that memo, he was like, Bob, let me handle this. He said, oh, good joke. That was his response to this memo.
He's like, everyone's laughing on set.
Yeah.
That was what.
I love that story. It makes sense not only to be a great and influential director like he is, you also got to know how to play the politics with the producers. And so he clearly has the mind to just be like, okay, like, I'm not going to fight you. I'm just going to convince you in a weird way not to do this. He's really good at that.
I think Zemeckis also was like, can you handle that? Basically.
Yeah. It's really cool. I think there's a few things legacy-wise from this movie. I think I know he did Romancing the Stone, but this is really what launched Rob Zemeckis into like the top tier of in-demand directors, that when he made a movie for that, like, really about 20 years there, it was like you had to go see it. It was going to be good. Forrest Gump, all these other Contact, Roger Rabbit, they're all going to be good. They're all going to have that Spielbergian like fun to it. They're all going to be unique. And he launched himself to that standing with Back to the Future. And he found out, not only that, but he really found his tone for his movies. Because if you notice after that, all of his movies kind of had, I don't know about Contact maybe, but like, Roger Rabbit, Forrest Gump, these movies had this kind of sort of light-hearted tone, family-friendly tone that was also a good movie that he was able to put together. So this was a really big movie to launch him into that stratosphere. I also did want to say for Michael J. Fox too, he reaches I know he was already famous from Family Ties, but this puts him in a level of like just untouchable stardom. I want to kind of compare it to like Mark Hamill after he did Star Wars, where it just didn't matter what he did after that. It could have been anything. It didn't matter. He was so ingrained in pop culture that he's a legend just for that one movie. And that's kind of what happened to Michael J. Fox. When someone brings him up, first thing they're going to say is Back to the Future. Then they're probably going to say Teen Wolf. And then they might say Family Ties. And that's probably all they're going to say movie-wise about him. Or TV too. Does that sound right?
Yeah. I don't know if either one of y'all seen Spin City. Like, it was a sitcom, late 90s. He still had the power. And he like, not anything he did, he still had the juice. He still has the juice. Even, I don't know if y'all saw the documentary Still Alive last year. I love that, man.
It's on Apple TV, right?
Yeah, it's good.
I know he did say, I think when they were filming part 3 is when he first started to feel like the Parkinson's, like there was something wrong. That's when he first started to notice that there was something wrong with him.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate.
And it's crazy because it took 11 months to shoot Back to the Future 2 and 3 back to back.
Yeah.
And his dad died at the same time. He had a kid. Like, there's a lot going on in that time in his life. So it's like it's ingrained in his life, and very important time for him, at least. I don't think Bob Zemeckis gets his credit though nowadays. If you talk about like, great directors and people are always, it's like Ridley Scott, like the name doesn't come up enough. And the movies that he's made, like some of these directors, they don't have that power in their pinky to direct movies like he does.
I'll always still go to bat for him, even though he's not the greatest anymore. But
it's like what Tarantino says, how he wants to quit while he's ahead, because older directors outside of like Marty and Spielberg and some of the greats, you really start to lose your touch when you get older. And so it happened.
He had it with Flight, though.
Yeah, right? Flight was like that flicker of hope.
I have faith that he can bring it back. I think he can bring it back still. Like, I'm excited because it's like, look at what Coppola did with Megalopolis. Like, whatever it ends up becoming, at least he's done that, Yeah. And these guys, I've always loved them. I always will. And I always hope, like, bro's got one more good movie. He's got something else. He's got that heart left in him. And it ultimately comes down to scripts that he's getting, right? You can be a great director, but if the writing isn't there, that's the problem, right? And Christopher Lloyd, you're talking about Michael J. Fox, but Christopher Lloyd went goated with this movie too.
Oh, yeah.
But then he had like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and he doesn't show up too much anymore besides in Nobody. But Christopher Lloyd, amazing in this movie.
Oh yeah, that was a great little part of Nobody. He's been like looks the same age for like the last 30 years though. It's really funny.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. It's like Palpatine, right?
Yeah.
Zemeckis' next movie, he has Tom Hanks and Robin Wright coming back with Kelly Riley. He's on Yellowstone, I think. Paul Bettany's in it, and Michelle Dockery from Downton Abbey. So he's still getting the cast to come. So we'll see.
I'm excited.
Maybe this is his
I'm excited.
Megalopolis.
Cautiously.
Yeah.
I know. I'm still excited when I see his name, and then I haven't seen Pinocchio though. I don't know if I will, but we'll see.
What you're talking about? Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, right?
Yes, that one. No.
Was he the director on that too, or was he just the producer? Oh, he was the director, and he directed The Witches. Oh, poor guy. Yeah, that's not a good.
He had it
run.
with Flight though. I thought he was
He
gonna
did.
come back after Flight. He
Well,
had it with Flight, but
And I know, I mean, the 2000s wasn't a whole waste. Castaway, well, I guess Castaway was 2000, so yeah, it's been a while. He did
And
a Christmas
then
Carol.
Polar Express. That's about it.
Oh, that was the Jim Carrey one.
Yeah.
Never mind.
I think he delved in too much of the like CGI motion
Mocap.
capture. Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
makes, I guess it really was something he was fascinated with, which kind of took up the 2000s for him. And then you're right, Flight, he gets it back. The Walk was a weird choice after that, but I'm not going to, like, that wasn't horrible. And then, yeah, it just kind of.
It was solid.
Solid movie,
It
though.
wasn't a
That's-
bad
yeah.
movie.
That's when I thought he was like, okay, maybe he's coming
The
back.
documentary is fantastic, though. The documentary blew it out.
Man
the
on
water.
Wire, yeah.
So I mean, and realistically, hasn't been even 10 years since he made a bad or a good movie. Like The Walk was 2015. Hasn't been 10 years. He can make another good movie. You're right. I hope he does, because he had, you don't see a lot of people with that
It's the
sort of
writing.
tone that he has
It's the
anymore.
writing.
Mm-hmm.
That action adventure, family friendly kind of tone. You only get those from the Marvel movies, which we don't need to go into what they replicate there. But he's one of the few left that do that tone outside of IP.
And we love him for it, man. I've always had love for Bob Zemeckis. And in Ready Player One, they have something about Zemeckis in there. And I remember seeing
The
the movie in
Zemeckis
the
cube.
theater and just being I was so happy about that. Like, Zemeckis, man. Like, all love to the man. I literally followed this man's, there's an Instagram account from his wife called Bob's Shoes, where it's just her posting this man's shoes, and I was following that. That's how much of a fan I am.
What I loved in the Ready Player One is it was the Zemeckis cube, and then when he used it, the Back to the Future little theme played when he used it, and I was like, oh,
And they have the DeLorean.
Yeah.
yeah, he used a DeLorean too, yeah.
Yeah, it really makes sense, because if you think about it, how similar their movies are to each other in tone, they probably just have a very similar brain for movies. It's probably why they get along so much. It's a really cool pairing.
And I will say, legacy-wise, I am glad that Spielberg had faith in him, because Spielberg's worst, quote-unquote, worst movie was 1941, and Bob Zemeckis, Bob Gill wrote that movie, right? And someone else might have just been like, nah, I ain't working with you again. Get out of here. But he kept them together because he knew who these guys were. And it's a testament to Spielberg as a producer and just as a person to know people and talent. I just love the Spielberg. Alrighty, as KD says, Mom, you the MVP. Who is the person who put the team on their back for this movie? If they weren't there, this movie would not be as good as it was as an enterprise as a whole. Pat, who is your MVP for this movie?
My MVP is the GOAT, Steven Spielberg, because if he didn't step in and help, this movie would have never been made, because every studio passed. And like you said, he took the gamble on these guys, because he produced Zemeckis' first movie, I Want to Hold Your Hand, and he produced Used Cars, which is Zemeckis' second movie, and he directed their script. So he was always taking a gamble with these guys. I think if he didn't come in and help and bring in Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall with that like whole producing team that they have had for 30, 40 years now, this movie wouldn't exist. And for me, that's why he is the GOAT and the best to ever do it. And if he's the MVP of this movie.
And not to mention how influential Spielberg had to be on Zemeckis, when you just see how similar in tone this is to like E.T. and some of his other movies. So yeah, that's a great choice.
People forget that like that crew of like Coppola, Spielberg, Scorsese, De Palma, Zemeckis was in there. Marty, he's friends with everybody.
Yeah.
Like he was in there, and he just was never given that like big shot like they all got.
Mm-hmm.
And Back to the Future was the one. I'm sure the studio probably was like, Steven, I want you to do this. And he was like, no, this is Bob's thing. Yeah. It's not mine. It's his. So, And that's MVP.
Yeah.
I love all those guys, honestly. Like they all have so many good movies.
For MVP, for me, I actually did write down Spielberg first and then deleted it because I was like, I don't know if I want to give him the producer credit, even though I was thinking the exact same things you just said about how this movie would have never got made without Spielberg. So I do want to give it to Zemeckis for this because the command of tone he has in this movie that simultaneously keeps it from being like too hokey, but also, or B-movie-ish, but also not taking itself too seriously. It's really easy to get that tone wrong. Literally the only other person on earth who gets that right is Spielberg. So Zemeckis being able to do that type of tone in this movie and make it work and become a classic of all time, that's hard to do, and I want to give him the credit here. So he's my MVP.
I think Lord and Miller are the only ones in recent memory.
I'm talking about it in the 80s.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying like just in all of history, like Lord and Miller are the only guys that have come after these two that get close to it.
But never in terms of the movies they put out have been, as monumental as, this.
I mean, we'll see. Time will tell.
Sure.
Time will tell. That's why it's like these conversations. It's like you can talk about movies, especially after like 35 years, but you never know what's gonna happen next. Especially with some of these great creatives that are out there and still doing work. We don't even know what like Spielberg could go even greater somehow.
Yeah, he will. People act like West Side Story wasn't like top 10, top 15 Spielberg. Like that's a good ass movie.
Fabelmans is great.
Fabelmans.
How did he come and make a better movie than Robert Wise in like the OG movie? Like he perfected that even more somehow. Like cinematography aside, he made the story actually great.
Okay, Vikash, what's your MVP?
See, y'all be lacking. The MVP for this movie is Einstein. He is the best dog in a movie I've ever seen. Why are y'all disrespecting dog actors?
It's a lot of disrespect to, Old Yeller, and there's a good tradition.
I'm not worried about Old Yeller. Einstein went through time.
Okay, wait,
man.
I do want to say before you get to your actual MVP, the Einstein was supposed to be a monkey, just for people listening. And I'm glad. I don't know what the obsession with monkeys were back in like the 80s and 90s, where they're in a lot of TV shows and just bit parts of movies, because you don't see that anymore. But I'm glad they made him a dog because that aged a lot better.
They're easier to train.
Yeah. Oh, monkeys are?
Yep.
Is that why? So is it now they can just do a lot of CGI for the harder dog stuff if they need to? Or like, yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. But the actual one, it is Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis. These guys, what they wrote. Like, the script is key, and this idea just wouldn't have existed without them. And I think them having it in their hands for so long, everybody saying no, kind of helped them get the movie even better. And the love you feel from this script is just something else. Like, this is one of the best scripts, and no one has made something like this again besides them, right? So they the MVPs for me.
Yeah, Bob Gale doesn't get his credit. Everybody talks about Zemeckis, but Bob Gale was like just as much about this team. For this tandem, he was just as important as Zemeckis.
Yeah, you were talking about the fridge, and when they were trying to do the fridge stuff, Bob Gale is writing on the typewriter. Bob Zemeckis is pacing back and forth, and then Spielberg is on the couch just listening to these two go crazy about this problem that they were having narratively with like the car not being there yet. So it's like he's definitely got his piece in there, and Bob Gale, it's the biggest thing he's ever done, and he's still, alive and well, writing about, Back to the Future still to some extent.
Yeah, it's really odd looking at his IMDb. He really just did Back to the Future and then did like Back to Future the Ride, Back to the Future, the video slots, Back to Future the game. Like, I'm surprised he never got more work after this. It's really odd.
Hollywood is weird, man.
Yeah. Okay.
I know. I work in it.
But let's wind down. Pat, do you have a companion movie for Back to the Future?
I wrote down time travel movies, Palm Springs, and like basically like a Groundhog Day and About Time. But the more I think about it, the companion movies are 2 and 3, because to me, it's hard to like be like, oh, let's watch Palm Springs now after Back to the Future. You just want to go back to those characters, and it's great that we have 2 and 3 to follow, in my opinion, the best movie ever made.
And it goes nonstop. It's like the action, like the thrill of like watching Doc and Marty from 1 to 2 to 3. It's always there and it's consistent.
And
and everyone behind the camera is pretty consistent, right?
And what I
In
love
terms
about
of that,
them
too.
is those movies start right 5 seconds after the last movie. And I think that's what makes it perfect to me. But I wrote those down. But to me, the more I think about it, I think 2 and 3 are the companion to which is a cop
But
out.
I love a lot of those movies. Like About Time, like Zach and Kat very recently just saw them.
Great
About
movie.
Time. Fantastic movie.
Yeah, speaking of About Time, that's actually what I was going to choose because my biggest problem was when I wanted to rec a companion movie to this, I wanted to say like Indiana Jones, and then I was like, well, everybody's seen Indiana Jones probably that's listening to this podcast, but everybody who's listening to this podcast may have not seen About Time. So I just wanted to think of another movie that took the idea of time travel and did something interesting with it. In terms of like tone of the movie, it's probably not similar to this at all. But in terms of just if you're interested in another time travel movie that has a slightly different tone, but does it in a very interesting way and is a good movie, check out About Time. It's awesome.
And you know what's funny? Y'all went like time travel. I went tone. So for me, so the first one that I have is the Still Alive doc. If you love this movie and you like just Marty McFly, I think Michael J. Fox's real documentary about him is quite compelling, and Still Alive is just a fun doc to watch. I recommend that. But tone-wise, I went with Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
Because you get more of Christopher Lloyd in that also, and you get this same sort of tone. And Christopher Lloyd goes from being my favorite scientific comedy character to like one of the downright worst. He plays this villain so well in that movie. Like you love him and then you straight up hate him in the next one. So it's like Who Framed Roger Rabbit is just one of the best movies ever made. Just like this, a technical masterpiece. And then you get a whole other story, noir vibes, Mickey Mouse, and everyone in between. I love that movie. I feel like people don't talk about that enough, too.
Yeah, I think that's a good rec. I think anything that Zemeckis has done, a lot of his stuff probably has a lot of the same vibe to it. So I think that's a great thing.
Pat, I don't know what your love is for Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I don't know. I saw it at a very specific time in life, and I literally for Disney Day in high school, I went as the detective, the main guy in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That's how much I love that movie.
I haven't seen that in
and
years.
No one got the costume.
What did I go for as Disney Day? Was I there?
You were there. I don't remember. I remember being in the weight room in a suit.
What are your opinions on Christopher Lloyd as the bad guy in Dennis the Menace? Have you ever seen?
Now I gotta rewatch
I don't
Dennis
know
the
if I've seen
Menace.
Dennis the Menace.
He's just I always, whenever I see a can of beans, I only ever think of him eating beans in Dennis the Menace.
I've seen that referenced a ton though. Yeah.
I haven't seen Dennis the Menace since I was probably
I used to love that movie.
I remember I've seen it a couple of times. I don't know why I'm blanking on him being in it. I remember the other older fella in it.
He did not. John Hughes produced it.
Oh, that actually kind of makes sense.
Yeah, Walter Matthau is the old guy.
Yeah, Walter Matthau. Yeah. Yep.
Why didn't you tell me that Christopher Lloyd shows up in The Mandalorian? I would have watched
Yes,
that episode.
he does.
I've only seen the first 2
him,
seasons.
Jack Black. Okay, so the episode he shows up in is kind of cape shit. I really enjoyed the episode. Some people didn't, whatever. Jack Black and that one singer, Lizzo, they're a couple or something, and they have to get to their planet to find something. It literally, that's the story. They just go there to find something that they need. And there's a bunch of Mandalorians there who are like mercenaries. It's a whole plot arc thing, but Christopher Lloyd shows up in the middle of that, and he has a good role in it, actually. He actually is really good in that.
Okay. Sorry, I can't help but look at IMDb. It's almost like a tick. Yeah, all right, wind it down before I get stuck in this.
Yo, Pat, it has been a fantastic time having you here. Everybody on Cinema Pursuit, please go check out his podcast. Pat, give everybody the socials and the names for the pod.
Called The Commentary Podcast. We're on Twitter at T and then Commentary Pod, and same on Instagram. Go follow me there. I'm on Twitter at Pat PATTBB8. Didn't realize I made a Star Wars reference when I made that. Wasn't thinking it. I'm not that big of a Star Wars fan.
I didn't even I didn't even know that.
I didn't
even
realize
know
that. Yeah.
When I typed it out, I was like, whatever. I'm not like a huge Star Wars fan like that, but that's my handle on Twitter. So, and you can see all my
he's a great follow.
all my incredible takes on Twitter. So
we have a good time on Twitter. That's where we met, and man, we've been vibing, and it's like, it's a testament to the internet. That's what this is, and I'm just glad that we were able to do this. We will have Pat on the podcast soon enough. We will be doing National Treasure, which I'm so excited for, man.
hell yes, I am ready.
And I was on his podcast too. We did Roman Holiday. If you haven't seen that movie, go check out Roman Holiday. I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Seriously, thank you for having me on here. This has been a blast. I love this movie, and I could talk about it all day. So thank you so much.
Great, Scott. I love it too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Cinema Pursuit. Cinema Pursuit is produced by Katie Nadell, Zach Nadell, and Vikas Patel. Special thanks to Cole Cooper for the intro and outro music. You can listen to Cinema Pursuit on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you may listen to podcasts. Follow us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram at Cinema Pursuit Podcast, Twitter or X at Cin Pursuit Pod, and check out our subreddit, r/Cinema Pursuit.